Hey everyone, I have a super interesting guest today, Melissa, the founder of eWebinar, and I would love to start with you bragging a bit about yourself. It's a bit cringe, but I just think you did a ton of interesting stuff over the years, so I would just love to hear the honest and maybe even a bit braggy version of why everybody here should listen to you.
I mean, that's kind of putting me on the spot. The long story short is I'm 3 times bootstrapper, been in startups for 14 years, building my third startup, which is eWebinar. eWebinar turns videos into webinars, so you don't have to do onboarding and training and demo webinars over and over again. So we automate live webinars that are repetitive. Yeah, so I've been running this company for 5 years. I'm also a digital nomad, so I travel about 11 months of the year with a home base in Amsterdam. So currently in Mexico City. And I also have a newsletter, melissakwan.com, which I write on Substack 2 times a month on how to build companies without an abundance of resources and friends in high places. And I also share multiple times weekly on LinkedIn about my journey bootstrapping 3 companies.
Love that. I mean, 11 months out of the year in a different place sounds exciting and a bit hard as well.
Yeah, I would say it's mostly exciting.
Makes sense. I mean, let's set a bit of context. You're 6 years in another pod you recorded 2 months ago. You mentioned that you were roughly 12 employees. Like, how big is the company revenue or customer-wise right now?
We're almost at 2 million ARR. Everyone's a contractor. We have about 15 people full-time and part-time on an as-needed basis. As needed are just things like writers, designers, things like that we don't need full-time. Yeah, I mean, we're a lifestyle company, completely bootstrapped.
I mean, that's great context already. You took a while to launch the product initially. I think you mentioned like 1.5 or 2 years in a different conversation with someone. Tell us a bit about like the early journey, because for me from the outside, like I'm building a new startup right now, and we're I think like 2.5 months into coding. I'm already getting anxious to be honest. So like, tell us about like the early journey of like building the startup.
Yeah, so I started this company about 2 months after I sold my last company. Had 2 startups before this that spanned about 9 years. And eWebinar solves a problem that I lived with in the past. So because we were always bootstrapped, I was the one that was doing all the repetitive demos, onboarding trainings over and over again for my customers. So this was just an idea that I wish existed. There are similar products out there, but none built to the extent that I wanted it to be built, to really be able to democratize myself from my computer. So that was kind of the origin story of eWebinar. But I think that you can really only move as fast as time allows. There is a process to design, to brand, to build a product, to make mistakes. And it took us about 1.5 years to get the product out the door. I don't think that's very long. I think that's pretty standard. Jason Lemkin famously said that it takes about 2 years for a SaaS company to kind of get out the door. But I would add that it's probably another 2 years to really like be able to see the light of day and see meaningful revenue. So I think we're pretty on track. I think mainly I wanted to make sure that we can be revenue generating from day one. So we did probably spend about an extra 6 months building the product to make sure people would actually pay for it. There was no beta, no alpha. Everybody knew that when they signed up for a trial, even though it's a new product, that they would be paying after the trial period is over. Because we're a bootstrap company, we don't have the luxury of, not having customers pay us. So maybe we could have gotten it out the door in a year, but that's not my intention. I wanted to make money right away.
Yeah. I mean, I love the take of not using the standard advice of basically, ship something super crappy, just get it out there. Because, I mean, you only get a first impression once, so I totally get that. And I mean, over the 6 years and the 4 years where the product is like fully live and people could start like buying it from you, what were a couple of I think maybe like the phases of that growth to 2 million ARR? Because I assume it wasn't just like a straight line without any ups or downs. So walk us a bit through the journey from like a go-to-market perspective.
I mean, these are all very big questions and very open-ended. So it's very difficult for me to respond to them in a succinct way, but I'll try. I mean, it wasn't really a straight line, but it was slow and steady growth. We didn't pump any money into marketing. The only marketing we do is like some retargeting ads, and also writing content. But we actually learned SEO and keyword research and things like that on our own. I mean, anyone that does SEO will know that it's not really working super well right now, I guess, in the last 6 to 9 months because of ChatGPT and people not really searching on Google anymore, not really clicking on links. But we got the company off the ground by just me doing one-on-one sales, just founder-led sales from the beginning for about 6 to 9 months. Once I ran out of customers for that, once I ran out of prospects for that, that's when I discovered LinkedIn and started writing daily. And then as I got more engagement, I started writing 3-4 times a week instead. So that actually brought a lot of eyeballs. I started running my own podcast, profit-led, but also started to guest on other people's podcasts. So in the last couple of years, I've been on about 100 podcasts or more. That does not include my own. So there's a lot of personal branding and content creation on top of SEO and really peppering, the internet with content that we want people to find. So there wasn't really a hockey stick situation. We've been making revenue about 4.5 years now. We've never had a down month, even though, sometimes we might be like break even, have a kind of a zero growth rate, but we've never had a negative month. In the first 2 years, it was easy to grow, 5 to 10% per month just because, revenue was low. And then it goes down to, single digit percentage. And then of course, now, sometimes we have good months, which are like, 7 to 8%. Sometimes we have okay months, which are like, sub 1%. But, we're always trying to do things to push revenue. And also, in the last 1.5 years, we started to add add-ons, so be able to serve our power users with additional features that they can, pay more for. Whereas in the beginning, we started off with like 3 really basic plans, things like that. So it's just as we learn more about the product and how our customers use our platform, we've changed pricing once. So we've doubled pricing 2 years into the product going live. So that gave us around a 33% boost overnight.
From which price point to like what was the jump? Do you remember?
It was small. Like our product used to be like $49.99 and $199, and now it's like $99, $199, and $299. So, I mean, it's double, but it's still not a lot. So we are not an enterprise product. We're really, product like growth and self-serve. Still very low price point. So we don't have a sales team, which helps with the burn. So everything is self-serve, and people discover us on their own and go into a 14-day trial, and they either convert or not.
I would love to double click on the enterprise thing, because in your one of your podcast episodes, you mentioned that you're happy that you don't do an enterprise product right now, and that it was super on purpose.
Yep.
Tell me a bit about your opinion on like building for the enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, I had 2 enterprise SaaS companies before this, and I think a lot of people think that the path to more revenue, quick revenue, is going up market. And while that is, I guess, kind of true from a revenue perspective, a lot of people don't understand the cost that comes with enterprise sales, right? So, longer sales cycle, there's no free money, right? If somebody's paying you $10,000 to $100,000, like, it's going to be a longer decision-making process. More people have to be involved. There's going to be customizations. There's probably going to be compliance, right? Because they're probably bigger companies. So you have to invest in GDPR, SOC 2 compliance, which is a big cost as well. Your best salespeople that are going to be able to sell enterprise and trained to sell enterprise are going to be expensive. So unless you, the founder, can actually run the enterprise sales cycles, it's going to be pretty tough. I was only able to do that because enterprise sales is my background. The last job that I quit was at SAP 14 years ago. So I have a lot of experience with that. And then, of course, there's going to be customer success as well, right? So if you're a self-serve product, someone's paying you $200 a month, they don't expect to get you on the phone, right? So all of our support is done on chat, text, and on email. Whereas if somebody's paying you $100,000 a month, right, you're going to have CS managers, account managers. They have your phone number. You need to be at their beck and call. Maybe you have to go to conferences to meet them in person. Maybe you have to fly to their location. It's just a different way of selling a product that a lot of startups don't really understand, right? They really just focus on the contract, but they don't focus on all the costs that actually come with it. So coming to eWebinar, I knew that for this particular startup, I was not going to go enterprise. And so we make a lot of decisions because I want a lifestyle that doesn't require me to be on a plane, going to a booth, going to a conference, which is what I did for 10 years before this.
Do you feel like it's also just harder for bootstrappers in general to go enterprise just because you need so much infrastructure and like you can't just throw $1 million of VC money against it, basically?
I don't think it's harder. Like, I mean, it's not so much a money thing. I think it's a kind of an experience thing as well, right?
Hmm.
Like as I said in the beginning, like it's you can only build the product as quick as time allows. And a product that big companies will buy is going to require a lot more meat on the bone, right? You can't like no big company is going to buy a bare bone MVP. Right. So maybe smaller companies will, but if we're talking like large enterprise, like they're going to have to see that you have worked with smaller companies, medium-sized companies, you have everything in place, you have your compliance in place, and then the bigger companies will start to buy from you. Right? Just because you solve a problem for them does not mean they're going to jump to go buy that product, right? And the reason is because when a company rolls out a product, they can't just rip it out. So
Yeah.
the people that are making decisions to include this, to integrate this in their workflow, they've made conscious decisions to put this product into their company. And that's why they're investing this kind of money in you guys, right? So someone that commits to buy Salesforce is not going to implement it and decide to change their mind next month, right? They're going to continue to implement it for maybe years to come. So I think that it's just harder for startups because the product just needs to be more mature and bigger, and there needs to be more experience, from the founding team and the founders to be able to have those conversations. I mean, as in terms of money, like if you can sell an enterprise product, and there is a company that's willing to pay you, you can build that price into the contract. But are you willing to have one customer make up 95% of your revenue? Because then you're becoming their agency and you're going to be at their beck and call. So in my last company, our largest customer was 15% of our revenue. So anytime they emailed us, we'd run to them. Or like anytime we
Yeah.
issue their invoice, we're afraid that they won't pay. But, it's net 30 days, but they always take like 90 days to pay. And that makes us nervous, right? So there's a lot of that stuff. So having lived through that, I just know that I would rather have a company where many different customers have tiny pieces of the pie than a group of customers that have like 10 pieces of the pie, for example.
I mean, another business I own is an agency, and that hit home a lot. I know that. I mean, what I would love to dig into, something you also mentioned earlier, is that SEO changed a lot, because I hear two different things like right now, because I'm super early stage, just working on getting something off the ground, not even product ready. And some people just say, hey, you must do SEO. It's like every startup basically needs to do it, and it's crazy if you don't, even though there's ChatGPT and everything. And the others say, hey, it's basically dead in the water already. It takes 12 months to gain any traction SEO anyway, so don't even bother starting, because in 12 months there will be like no traffic to grab anymore. Like, what advice would you give someone like me in the current situation? Like, should you go into SEO? Is it like too late? How would you
I
handle such a
mean,
situation?
whether you should invest in SEO or not just depends like how people are finding out about you, right? So if you're doing direct sales, then you don't like and your customers aren't searching on the internet for you, then maybe SEO is not your best strategy. But if you're like us and you're a low cost product and you rely on people coming to your website to convert on their own and go on a demo on their own, and if that's how your primary customers, your ICPs find you, then there's no real way around, investing in SEO and content. Like how else are they going to find you, right? And even though ChatGPT and Gemini and all these kind of search platforms are I guess surfacing answers for people
Yeah.
in a different way than Google. Like those answers are coming from somewhere. Those links are coming from somewhere. So if you don't exist on the internet, then how are those platforms going to surface them? Right. So for us, like we've really focused on, keywords like automated webinar, webinar automation, on-demand webinar, things like that. So if somebody asks a question on ChatGPT, we are still going to come up as one of the top solutions. But it's because in the last few years, we've invested in being on the first page. It just means that we're not spending a lot of time creating brand new content, but we are,
Interesting.
we've scaled back 50%, and really just focusing on refreshing the content that we have and making sure that we still appear on page one versus trying to create a lot more new content, which may not give us the ROI that we used to.
Is it just because you build up such a huge base of content over the years, or more that you think it's more a quality game and less of a quantity game nowadays?
Well, it's both, right? We've never just pumped out garbage content. Like there's a lot of companies that do that. I think there was like a big LinkedIn post that went viral about like how HubSpot was
Yeah.
getting a lot less traffic, but it was because of like, I don't know what the word for it, but it was like because of content that like isn't high quality and not so
Yeah.
relevant that are like getting kind of
So basically,
deprioritized.
I think programmatic SEO or something like
Yeah,
they
so
did a lot of that. Yeah.
we have always focused on writing like high quality content for the business user so that when people read it, it's useful and it's
Yeah.
something that they can execute on. And we've always focused on lower volume keywords that are easier to get because a lot of people aren't focusing on those. But mostly like we spend a lot of time writing, 4,000 word blogs that
Yeah.
are actually useful for people versus like just like here's the top 10 software that you should look at and we're number one. Like we also have those, but we focus on writing it in a way that's intelligent and not just for the sake of having content there.
I mean, makes a ton of sense. Even for people evaluating buying or not, it's just super useful. And I mean, I'm building a product in the LinkedIn space, so I obviously have to touch on your LinkedIn because you have like 40K plus 1,000 followers on there. And you just mentioned, yeah, I post like 2 or 3 times a week. So are you really so chill about the process, or like how did you grow such a big audience?
Well, I actually had a nice viral streak about a year and a half ago. Um, LinkedIn has changed their algorithm, which is kind of sad because a lot of creators like me that were creating original content are getting like 5% of the engagement that we used to get. So myself and a lot of other creators I know are actually spending a lot less time on there because speaking about high quality content, like it takes me the same amount of time to write one piece of content, like whether it's, say it's a post, right? I used to spend 10 hours a week writing them. But I used to get 4,000 reactions
Yeah.
per post, right? But now I'd be lucky if I get 100. But it still takes me, even if I time box it, it still takes me like 2 or 3 hours, right? So the ROI is not really there. How I started though, I guess back in like a couple years ago when LinkedIn had its heyday, I took Justin Welsh's course on like how to build an audience on LinkedIn because I ran out of prospects to sell to, and I needed a way to get in front of people one to many. And I just followed that template. I wrote something that was relevant to my expertise, which is bootstrapping once a week, or sorry, once a day, every week for
Yeah.
probably like 6 or 7 months. And then when I started to get more traction, more reactions on my posts, I like lessened it because I also learned which days I would get almost no engagement. So for Friday,
Interesting.
Saturday, for example, if I'm getting almost no engagement, I'd rather not waste that piece of content, right? I'd rather post it on Sunday, Monday. And then I started writing longer form, more intentional posts because those were the ones that were getting more engagement. So as I learned what my audience liked and what the platform liked, I kind of tailored my content. But really the saving grace was like a year and a half ago. Like I just hit like 10 viral posts in a row. And that really shot up my audience. But right now, I'm actually focusing more on building my Substack newsletter on my own domain.
Yeah.
Because you actually get people who subscribe to you that want to see your content, and we get their email address, right? It's a direct link to their inbox. At the end of the day, like 1 or 2% maximum of any social media platform, I mean, let's say LinkedIn, actually see your content. And like people are scrolling so fast, right? And nowadays, like everybody's at the party, like everybody is writing all the time. So it's pretty difficult, I think, right now on LinkedIn to stand out. And also, like, I'm also seeing a lot of good content being buried and really pathetic content. Like here, like, look at my car, getting thousands of reactions, which for a creator like me, it's a little bit discouraging because I'm not going to write that stuff. But if that's the stuff that people care about and that's the stuff that the platform is prioritizing, why am I spending time writing quality content if I can just post a picture of my car? Right. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like where I am now. Like I maintain it once in a while, but mostly to push my newsletter and my podcast. And I'd be lucky if I get like even 100 at this time. But I'm definitely this year switching strategies. And over time, I think I've written over 400 posts, right, in the last couple of years. So I'm looking at how to build kind of the same type of audience within Substack. And they have a notes feature that's kind of like posts. And I'm thinking like I might take a course. I just found a course yesterday, like on building an audience on Substack. So I might actually just reuse a bunch of my posts that I already wrote and like kind of fluff them up a bit and then see what happens in another platform. But LinkedIn is not where it used to be. It is still important, yes, but you gotta decide if it's worth your time and how much time are you going to put in it.
So first of all, I think building an owned audience is like super smart because it feels scary. I talk to a lot of people just because I'm building in this space, a lot of people that like started quite recently, I think like 1 or 2 years ago, and a lot of them drive like 80 to 90% of all their inbound revenue through LinkedIn, which is kind of amazing, but also feels a bit scary. So I totally feel that. I mean, maybe to wrap up, like a last, again, super high level question. You mentioned that you went from enterprise SaaS to companies that you were building to a PLG SaaS. What are the maybe non-intuitive things that you learned, or just like the things where if you would start over, or if you would give me as someone starting their first PLG SaaS, like what pieces of advice would you love to have known earlier, basically?
Yeah. The biggest mistake I think that I made coming from a sales-led company to PLG was I didn't fully understand what PLG meant. So product-led is not just product-led. It's really marketing-led and customer-led, right? Like we talk a lot about content and how people find you. Of course, like if they're in your product, then you can use your product to generate more customers. But how are they going to get to your product? So it's never just PLG. And being a sales-led founder for a decade, I had no idea, because I don't have a marketing background and neither does anybody on my team, that a product-led company, a self-serve company, meant that you have to create content on the internet so people can find you. And I learned that pretty late because I thought that I could get the company off the ground by doing founder-led sales. But ultimately, like at a $99 product, people aren't buying by picking up the phone.
Yeah.
So even if I'm reaching out to people, they're looking at my price point and they're not hopping on the call with me. And when they do hop on a call with me, it's not worth my time. Right. So I guess the biggest regret that I have was not investing in my personal brand and content for the year and a half that we were building the product. It's never too early to start writing content and be visible and be seen, because if you have a community, if you have an audience, you then have a voice. Right. But if you don't, then how are people going to find you? Of course, like SEO and podcasting, like that's one of them. But, Google was over 50% of our demo traffic. Right. And then if people find you on the internet, they might go to your LinkedIn profile, and that continues to build the trust. So you need kind of multiple channels. But I didn't start investing in myself and our voice and my own personal branding until I ran out of people to call. And that was 9 months after launch. So that was more than 2 years after I started this company. And had I done it earlier, I'm sure that my audience would even be bigger. Maybe we would have moved faster. Maybe we would have learned more about the iterations of the product earlier because more people would be using it. So that's the biggest advice that I have is like, if you are building a product today, or if you want to build a product today, start investing in personal brand and content, start getting on podcasts and just talk about things that you care about. Talk about things that, you have an expertise in so people get to know you, so that once your product rolls out, then you have an audience immediately to market that to.
Love that. Melissa, thanks a ton for taking the time. It was a pleasure to chat. Have a great rest of your day. Speak soon.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you too. Thanks so much.